an hour or so ago, I had the privilege of introducing our governor, and he said, Bobby, make it short. And I made it short. But now, if you'll just give me a minute or two to reintroduce our governor, who really doesn't need an introduction, I'll just simply say, we are all going to miss Governor Haslam. And I say that because of what he's done for our state. And I know he's done it with a great General Assembly, an enormous, great group of leaders. But when you reflect, at least from a jobs perspective, 440,000 new jobs since the governor joined the state. Inside of ECD, that represents about 1,200 projects, $33 billion of private capital, and hundreds of thousands of new jobs for Tennesseans. Now, what's interesting about what we're getting ready to enjoy is that Alan and our team, we've traveled the globe with the governor. The best recruiting partner is the governor, and the second best recruiting partner is the First Lady. So, First Lady, thank you. My wife calls her Chrissy, but it's the First Lady to the rest of us. So, having said that, the reason I think this is so interesting is I'm going to learn something new today. And I say that to you, we've traveled the globe to recruit, and not one time, and this speaks to the modesty of our governor, not one time has he mentioned Pilot Oil. And what an important part of the fabric of the economy of Tennessee and what that great company has done and continues to do, and then to hear from his father. So, ladies and gentlemen, the 49th governor of the great state of Tennessee, our boss and CEO, Governor Bill Haslam.
Okay. Thanks, Bobby.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Appreciate it. Thank you. This is not my dad. Good afternoon. My name is Blake Hogan, and I'm a U.S. Marine and founder of the Bunker Labs here in Tennessee. So it gives me great honor and pleasure to introduce one of the greatest veteran entrepreneurs in the state of Tennessee, Mr. Jim Haslam. So Mr. Haslam started out as All-American at a little school down in East Tennessee called University of Tennessee. I hear they're going to have a better season this year. He also told me backstage that the longer I live, the closer I get to winning the Heisman Trophy. So he's taken that entrepreneurial attitude and hasn't stopped a bit. So from UT to serving as a U.S. Army veteran in Korea, coming back and starting one small service station, and then growing that to one of the largest privately held companies. And he is setting an example for us to create the next greatest generation of military entrepreneurs. And thanks to Launch Tennessee, that's exactly what Bunker Labs is doing. So 4 years ago, Bunker was just an idea to connect business leaders to aspiring military entrepreneurs. Today, we're 26 locations, and we just announced, because of a pilot that was supported and led by Charlie Brock and Launch Tennessee, we're expanding to all 50 states and 100 locations. Thank you. Over the past 4 years, hundreds of those entrepreneurs have gone on to raise almost $65 million in capital. They've done about $70 million in revenue, and they've created over 1,500 jobs. And we've traveled all over the country, and the best state in the country for business is Tennessee. So, right? Yeah. So if you want to see how a few Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, and those we can neither confirm nor deny were in the CIA launch and grow businesses, you'll want to come to the last event on your schedule tonight for 3686 at WeWork, and you'll hear from Mayor Briley, you'll hear from Commissioner Rolfe, and you'll hear from the newest group of veterans and residents companies, a national partnership with WeWork, where we'll launch 10 companies. And over the next 60 days, in 14 cities, we'll launch 140 companies. And we're able to do it because of entrepreneurs like Fred Smith, the U.S. Marine who started FedEx, and because of the entrepreneurs like Mr. Jim Haslam, who you're about to hear from. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and please welcome to the stage U.S. Army veteran and entrepreneur, Mr. Jim Haslam.
a seat. All right, we're thrilled to hear. All right, you can always tell when it's a big game because not only is the upper deck full, but the skyboxes are full too. So that's how you know it's a big game. All right, what I want to do today is talk a little bit about, you started a company 60 years ago. By the way, the same month I was born. Thanks for paying a lot of attention to me. But I want to talk a little bit about the personal part of being an entrepreneur. I want to talk about taking on different partners, which you've done, and then just lessons learned. So let me start at the very beginning. As Blake said in the introduction, grew up, moved all over. First person in your family to get to go to college. You get to go to college because of a football scholarship. Graduate from UT, go to Korea, come home. How'd you decide to end up in the gasoline business?
Well, I needed a job, first of all. And incidentally, I'm the second best Tennessee football player here. Tim Towns is the best.
Hold that close to your mouth just so everybody...
Okay, I'm sorry. But I needed a job, and I was offered a job coaching high school football. This is February. Offered a job coaching high school football in South Pittsburgh. And I really wanted to do it. I said, when do I start? And they said, well, we'll start paying you in August. I said, ooh, that's not going to work. And I came back to Knoxville, and I'll let you determine if I'm smart or lucky. And I was offered a job at a local TV station selling advertising. And I came home, and I was talking to a couple of people in my family and some of my friends, and they said, you going to take that job? And I said, well, you know, I'm not really sure if TV's going to make it. So anybody who's achieved a modicum of, good word, Natalie, right? Modicum. That means small amount of success that says they weren't lucky is kidding you. And there was a man named Sam Claiborne up in Eufaula, Tennessee. He had a company called Fleet Oil Company, had 20 gas stations. All we sold was gas and oil, cigarettes, and Cokes. And he offered me a job doing real estate work, and they had a little wholesale division, so I went to work for him, and 3 years later, we started Pilot.
Now, some of these folks that are starting companies might say, man, 60 years later, and you got billions in sales and 30,000 employees, et cetera, et cetera. I'm guessing there were some moments, or I'm knowing, that in between time, it looked kind of iffy whether it would make it from one week to the next. So any memories of that, of kind of the early days when wondering if this whole thing was going to work or not?
Well, I remember back then, and it was all a cash business then, and we had to pay for our gasoline in 10 days. And you used to write the checks on Friday and hope the weather was good over the weekend, if you know what I mean. So anybody that says starting a business isn't tough, isn't being realistic. And you know, you have two different kinds of capital. You need intellectual capital and monetary capital. The mistake I made, quite frankly, I emphasized too much trying to raise money and to find more locations and not enough finding good people. And the one bit of advice I'd give to you, you can get all the money you want, but if you don't have good people working for you, you lose it.
So let's just go there for a minute. What have you learned? What have you learned about finding good people and hiring good people? We'll go to the monetary, the monetary capital piece next. But what have you learned about finding great human capital?
Well, I think you have to go after the best, and you have to challenge them. And when you hire a person, as we call it, a team member at Pilot, you have to give him or her every opportunity to succeed, and you have to entrust them. And you'll never get good people to work for you unless you trust them.
All right, let's move a little bit to the capital piece is interesting, and a lot of these folks are trying to figure out, well, how do I have the capital formation to make my business work? I was trying to think on the way over here, I'm trying to count the numbers of partners or different capital situations Pilot's been in, so maybe together we can think back through all this. So you're in business how long before you took on your first partner?
Well, we started business in '58, and by '64 and '65, we had 12 gas stations. We owed every First National Bank in every small town we had a gas station in. And one of my buddies who was an accountant said, you know, you need to leverage your overhead and get more gas stations. I said, I wish we could. We didn't have any money. And Marathon Oil Company came to us in 1964, and we actually consummated the deal in 1965. And we sold them half a pilot, and but the big thing, they agreed to loan us $2 million, and then after 5 years, 2 more. That was $4 million, and it cost us to build a location about 30 or 40,000. So we had 12, and that was enough money to build another 100 locations. And we stayed in partnership with them until 1988, if you remember. And we bought them out, and we owned Pilot all by ourselves. And then we got in a partnership with Lewis Dreyfus Company. Anybody know Lewis Dreyfus Company? A big commodities trader. And we bought them out. And then in 2001, we thought, my gosh, we want to keep on expanding, and it was a family-owned business. So we got Marathon back in. You all remember this well. And in
married, divorced, remarried.
Married, divorced, remarried. Never say bad things about your partner, because you might need them again. And it's interesting, when we went back to do it again with them, it was a whole new group of players. The first deal in '65, then we unwound it in '88, different players, and then we got back together with them in 2001, a whole different group of players. But they said, you know, we've talked to people about your family, and we trust you. And so that was important. So we sold half of them back to Marathon in 2001, and they had a network of travel centers. We had travel centers, put them all together. And then they wanted out in 2008. You remember that? And so we got a private equity firm called CVC, Equity Partners, and we sold them half of Pilot. And as you know, these people all want to get their money out. So we bought them back over a period of time. And then, well, it'll be a year on September 30th, we worked a deal out with Berkshire Hathaway, who's your ultimate partner. And if you deal with Berkshire Hathaway, they don't ever sell anything, so it's a lifetime deal. And this is really interesting. Of all the people we've ever dealt with, they were the easiest people to deal with.
I'm going to come back to Warren Buffett and doing a deal with Warren Buffett in a minute, but what have you learned about partners in the meantime? So 3 or 4 different partners, everything from an international oil company that was integrated exploration and all the way to retail, to a commodities trading firm, to a pure equity firm. And we'll save Buffett till later, but what have you learned about having partners along the way?
Well, the partner usually wants something from you. In the case of Marathon, they wanted to supply us with products. In the case of Lewis Dreyfus Company, they just wanted to make some money. They were hedgers and traders. In the case of a private equity partner, CVC, they wanted out and wanted to make some money. But I think when you have a partner, you have to be very open with them, tell them everything. Don't make big decisions all by yourself. Make sure they know exactly what you're doing and they're on board. Now, we have always been the operating partner, and our whether they be an oil company or a private equity company, commodities trader, they've let us run the company. But we have always told them exactly what we're doing. We never tried to hide anything from it. And I think when you have a partner, number one, you want to know, why are they in business? Is there something you can help them with in their business, or are they in strictly to make money? And either way is okay, but you need to know.
So let's go to Warren Buffett, perhaps the most famous investor of all time. What made you decide to do a deal with him? And I have some more questions on that, but let me start there. What made you decide to do a deal with Warren Buffett?
Well, when they first approached us, his older brother, Jimmy, runs the company, and they had approached him. So we went out and met with a guy named Byron Trott, who is kind of his investment banker. And he outlined the deal to us, and I really wasn't sold on it at all. And he said, well, go on out to Omaha. So Jimmy and I went out to Omaha on July 9th of last year. Natalie remembers it well. And it's kind of funny. You walk in there, and it's a big modern office building, Herbert, and he has one floor. And here they got this, what's second or third largest market cap in the country, and he got one floor. We said, how many people work here, Warren? And he said, 24. And he said, are you going to get any more? He said, no, what I tell them, this is all the space we have. So if you want more, you have to give up some of your space. Well, nobody wants to share their office with somebody. So it's kind of interesting. We go in there, and some of y'all might know his brother Jimmy, but Jimmy's always business, asking questions. Herbert knows this. And so Warren asked me, how old are you? And at the time I was 86, and he was 86. And you know how y'all will say, well, where were you on 9/11? Everybody in this room, you know where you were, right? And he says to me, well, Jim, where were you on Pearl Harbor Day? But, you know, we got to talking to him, and I said, well, Warren, why do you want to invest in Pilot? And this is interesting. He said, because I understand it. And he said, if you're going to get an investor, they have to understand your business. Warren, and I think this is one thing a business person, he or she, needs to do. You need to simplify things, not complicate things. You know what I mean? And Warren understood our business, and he said, you have a good track record, and you have good management, you know, and we want to invest with you. And this is an idea what kind of guy he is. So we get out there 11 o'clock, and it's 12 o'clock our time. We're all getting hungry, and it's about 12:30 their time. He said, well, y'all hungry? Oh, yeah. And he said, well, the restaurant's right around the corner. So we go around the corner, and at Pilot, in most places, we have food every place you look there. And he said, follow me. And so we go, and we get in the elevator. And I said, well, this is a big modern office building. There's a private club in it. And no, we get in the car. And he said, Jimmy, you and Byron ride in this car, and Jim, you and I ride in this car. I said,
Is he driving?
No, he's got a driver.
All right. Just want to make sure you weren't.
Hey, this is funny. This is really funny. They're on me about driving since I'm 87 years old. And I had a shoulder replacement about 6 or 7 weeks ago, and they said not to drive. So we got a voicemail system at Pilot. So I emailed a voicemail Jimmy and Bill that I was going to start driving, and tell them what your comment was.
I said, we paid that doctor good money to tell you it would be 6 years.
And then he said, I'll notify the highway patrol. But anyhow, so we go, and I think we're going to some private club. Well, we pull up the Hilton Hotel. I'm just following, and we walk through the lobby. We go in the coffee shop, and we eat at a table. And this lady comes over there and said, hi, Susie. Hi, Warren. What do you want, a cheeseburger or pimento cheese sandwich? I mean, the one thing that we've learned is that these people who have achieved super success are regular people, and they don't have big egos. And the best advice I could give anybody starting in business, don't have an ego.
All right, that's good advice. So the difference in the Buffett deal, though, versus the others was for the first time, not yet, but eventually he'll have the right to own the majority of the company, which I'm guessing as the founder of a company was a whole different decision than taking on a partner that you knew eventually would want out in some way. So this is a different decision. What made you okay with this?
Well, I struggled with it. I really did. And Pilot's office is kind of on a little hill overlooking the interstate. And I was telling Jimmy, I said, I never want to drive up this hill and tell all these people that work here at our sports center and the people who work at our stores that we sold them out. And so I want to be able to talk to them and say, this is a great deal for you. And the thing about it is that we'll always be financially strong. I mean, what's Buffett got, $110 billion or something. And so you're always financially strong, and the people will always know who's going to own the company. Quite frankly, if you got a company that we could have sold it to another oil company, and they would have come probably moved out of Knoxville, gotten rid of a lot of people. We sold it to a private equity company. You know the private equity story. They bought a baseball team, combined second base and shortstop, and eliminated center field. But that's pretty funny. Are there any private equity people in here? But what we did was establish continuity, and we're confident. Berkshire Hathaway doesn't want to run anything themselves. They want to get management. They have 83 companies that they own. Well, they own 100% of all of them except the furniture warehouse they talk about out there in Omaha, and then Pilot. But they have never, some CEOs have retired, but they've never dismissed a CEO. A couple of them quit for health reasons or retired, but they get management and they keep with it. So what I was able to look everybody in the eye, and Jimmy was too, and say, look, this company is forever. It's going to stay the same way. So it was a hard decision.
All right, tell me about I'm going to shift to the personal part. A lot of these folks are in the difficult position of building a company. They don't yet have they can't go delegate to everything. They're not at that point. And yet you started a company. You had, if I think I'm right, a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a precious newborn at the time. Soon to be your favorite child. But within that, you didn't give up, in my opinion, being a very engaged, active father, great husband, and very involved in the community. So how'd you do that? How'd you manage to build a company, remain involved in all the things you wanted to personally, and not kind of sacrifice your life?
Well, I think the biggest decision you make every day, and you got somebody scheduling you all the time, and you know exactly about this, right, Janet? But is how you're going to spend your time. And I think you have to spend your time on business, but you have to remember your family comes first. And it doesn't, one bit of best advice I can give you, it won't do you any good to make all the money in the world if it ruins your family. So make sure your family comes first. And I think you can, if you're running the business and you're scheduling yourself, and your daughter has a ballet thing you want to go see, your son has a Little League game, that's your decision. You can go ahead and do that. So it's a balancing act, but I think you have to get your priorities straight. And first comes faith, and then family, and then business, and then, of course, then the community. But I would also urge each of you all to become involved in your community with nonprofits, because you'll get a lot of satisfaction out of it.
And tell us why. I mean, you devoted a lot of your time to that, to things that wasn't your company, wasn't anything directly, but why did you spend so much time doing that?
Well, when I first got started in business, and all my children were young, and business was struggling, and there was a man named Max Friedman in Knoxville. He has a jewelry store on the main street in town, Gay Street, and he was city councilman. And he called me, and he said, funny thing, he said, Mr. Haslam, this guy, well, of course, I'm 87 now. He's probably 70. I thought he was the oldest man I'd ever been around. But he said, Mr. Haslam, we want you to work in the community chest. That's what United Way was called back then. And I said, well, Mr. Friedman, I appreciate the offer, but, I'm just starting this business. I got young kids and everything else. And he said, well, Mr. Haslam, what kind of business are you in? And I said, well, we got a bunch of gas stations. And he said, well, who you sell gas to? And I said, well, the people here in Knoxville and the people in other towns where we operate. And then he didn't call me Mr. Haslam. He said, son, you have to pay the rent. And I will never forget that, because I think as business people, we have to pay the rent. And to tell you the truth, people are always attacking the free enterprise system and all this stuff, but as long as we do it in the right way and we give back to the communities, the free enterprise system is by far so much better than anything else. But one of the strengths of the free enterprise system is giving back to the communities where you operate in.
So on a related note, you spent a lot of time in politics as well. You never ran, but you were even long before I was doing anything. You were very involved in the candidates that you believed in. Why again, that's a whole nother set of commitments, more responsibility, more time. Why'd you fool with that?
Well, you know, everybody gripes about government. You know, they say, and it starts in local level. You can say, well, the school system isn't any good. Right? And, you know, the city's not any good, the county, the state, the country. Well, we're the ones that elect all the people, and I think we have a responsibility to encourage people like Bill Haslam, I'll brag on him, to run for elective office. He ran for mayor and was mayor for 7 years, and he's going to be governor for 8 years, so he's taken 15 years out of his life for public service. And we need to encourage people like Bill to run for public office. And then I think what we have to do, and I've basically been a money raiser, not a political operator. And, you know, but I always say you give money to your church, you give money United Way, you invest money in political candidates. And I think it behooves all of us to find the best people to run at every level. And don't give them money, invest money. And I would say that I think I can speak for 99% of the people who gave Bill money, and they will say it was a good investment. So Natalie and I have gotten a tremendous amount of satisfaction out of politics. The first time I was involved in politics was 1964, 36 and 18, 54 years ago. Is that right? Geez. Howard Baker ran against a guy named Ross Bass for the Senate and lost. But we weren't discouraged, and he ran again in 66 and won. So we've gotten a lot of satisfaction out of politics. And I think business people, businessmen and women who abstain from getting involved in politics are making a real mistake, because then they can't gripe about government not being pro-business, not understanding the business person side of it.
So the first time I ran for mayor, Dad, as you can imagine, is a really, really big deal in Knoxville. He's been involved in everything. He's chaired everything, very involved in UT, et cetera, et cetera. And so when I ran for mayor the first time, a little bit of an issue. Is this just Jim Haslam trying to run one more place? You know, now he's going to go run the mayor's office. And I was out knocking on doors in a neighborhood, and knocked on a door, and this guy comes to the door and I said, hi, I'm Bill Haslam, running for mayor. I'd like your vote. Guy goes, Haslam. Said, you're related to that Jim Haslam? I said, uh-huh. And I'm thinking, all right, here we go. He goes, the one that used to play football at UT? I said, yes, sir. And he goes, whatever happened to him?
I'm going to tell you something. If you've never knocked on doors in a political race, you've missed some of the darndest things will happen. Herbert knows Jimmy Haslam, his older brother, real well. And one of our friends was knocking on the door and said, well, I want you to vote for Bill Haslam for mayor. And he said, oh, I don't like that guy. He said, oh, you've got him confused with his brother. And then Jimmy was knocking on this door. The guy's name is Ed Cyphers. You remember him, played football at UT, very successful businessman. By this time, he's pretty old, and his wife comes to the door, and, hey, Miss Cyphers, how are you? And there's he said, oh, Mr. Cyphers, how you doing? And he said, how old are you, Mr. Cyphers? And he said, I'm 84. And Jimmy said, early voting starts Monday. And I mean, when you knock on doors, I mean, it is so much fun. And I'll never forget last year, or 8 years ago, in the primary, we're up in Greenville, Tennessee, and it's a little hilly, and we're knocking, it's like today, but it's 100, and you're out there knocking on doors, and people say, come on in, have a glass of iced tea, and people appreciate for the most part, you're knocking on doors, so it's a ton of fun.
All right, let me get back to business and particularly being an entrepreneur. So, we could just tell stories to entertain ourselves for the next hour.
We've heard all these stories. We know them all.
All right, so when you're, I'm trying to guess on the age here, but somewhere in your mid-50s, you really gave up a lot of the operating control of the company you had started to Jimmy and to me at the time. So this is back in, 88, 89, 90, somewhere in there. Is that fair?
Yes.
I mean, whoever you are, if you start the company, I mean, there's legions of stories about people who start a company and then for one reason or other, they can't ever really give up the operating control. That's hard. And you're thinking, I built this thing, these folks are gonna screw it up, et cetera. So what made you willing to do that?
Well, it was hard, as you know. We had a lot of discussions, as you know. But I will say this, if you want to have a family business, you have to trust the next generation. And you have to give the next generation authority and let them do his or her own thing. And I know friends of ours who have not done that, and it's been a calamity. And it tears up the family, it tears up the business and everything. And if you have a family-owned business and you started it, you can't run it forever. And you don't want to run it forever, and you shouldn't run it forever. So train your next generation, give them authority, and let them run it at some point in time.
It was definitely a learning process. One time we were buying a piece of property down in St. Augustine, Florida, and I'd been down there negotiating for it, and came back, and I don't remember how much it was. It was like it was $405,000, and we came home, told him how much it would be. He climbed all over us. That's crazy. There's no way that's worth it. You just don't know what you're doing. And so we all get back on an airplane and fly back down there, and he says, I will show you how to do this. So we drive over there, park in the office, we get ready to walk in. He goes, no, you all stay. When we got ready we were out in the lobby, he said, you all stay here. I'm going to go back and talk to him. And so we go there, and he's in there, literally like an hour. And walks out, and we said, how'd it go? He said, let's get in the car. And we get in the car, and we said, so are we getting located? He said, yeah, we got it. I said, what are we paying? He goes, $403,000.
Well, actually, the story, it was $250. It was a piece of property.
But it didn't, you didn't get it down to $250.
I know it, I did. It was on the interstate, on Interstate 95 in St. Augustine, Florida. And Bill came back, and what was the Indians own all the property? Patel. It was owned by a Patel. And if you ever want to deal with a Patel, you're going to deal on their terms, I'll put it that way. So anyhow, I go in and I say, you guys wait out here. And I said, Mr. Patel, that is a nice looking piece of property. He said, yeah, it sure is. And I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. We'll give you $150 for it. Silence. $175. Silence. We finally got up to $250, and he said, yes, but you got to pay me all in cash. I did no negotiating whatsoever. So I walked out there, I hung my head with them. But one other story to tell about him, we had this deal that when we get new locations, we would get an option, but we wouldn't sign the contract until I'd seen the location. And there's this location in Kansas City that he'd gotten. And so we're making the approach, the landing gear's down and everything. I said, where's the contract? And I looked at it, and we'd already signed the contract. Well, by the time I looked at it, the door was open, and he was running, and I was chasing him all around the property.
How did it work out?
It worked out good.
All right, so this is actually a historical day. 70 years ago today, you got on a bus in St. Petersburg, Florida, and came to Tennessee really for the first time to be a freshman at the University of Tennessee, got off his Natalie likes to tell a story with your cardboard suitcase, and you really have never left to go back or to go anywhere else. If you were telling that 17-year-old, did you come to college as a 17-year-old?
Yeah.
Gosh. If you were telling that 17-year-old, if you were giving that person some advice about building their business career, so that was 70 years ago, and then 60 years ago, 10 years later, you start a company. So if you're telling that 17-year-old or that 27-year-old some advice about building a business, what would it be?
Well, first of all, you have to get an education. I think you know, some people make it without getting an education, going to college, but very few. So I would say get an education, number one. Number two, I was fortunate to go to work for somebody who was in the business, and I learned what the business was all about. And I think if you start a business, you better know something about it. You better know, you know, what are the essentials for making this business a success. How much money do you need, and know something about operating it. So I think they're the two biggest things I would say. You know, get your education, and then learn. You might not have to work in a similar business if you're starting a new business, but know enough about it that you can have your arms around it. Don't let it get its arms around you. Make sure you have your arms around the business. And one thing we have learned in Pilot over the years is that when we stay in our basic business, we really do well. We can operate chains. We can operate convenience stores, gas stations. We start a gas station, convenience stores, travel centers. We operate fast food restaurants. When we've got out of that area that we didn't know anything about, we haven't done as well. So make sure when you start a business, you know something about it.
In any business, any venture, you have great times that you celebrate, wonderful successes, and you have hard times, and you go through those really difficult times. What advice do you have for people? We got a couple of minutes left. What advice do you have for people who are in the middle of those difficult times, and you're wondering, is the company going to make it, or something's gone wrong? We've had a big issue with the public, whatever. What advice do you have for the hard times?
Well, we've had some hard times in Pilot. We had some hard times starting out. We've had some hard times recently. But I think the one thing you have to remember is when things are good, they're never as good as you think they are. And when things are bad, they're never as bad as you think they are. I'm a product of playing high school football and college football. And most of y'all, if you're from around here, the football stadium's named after General Nailon, who was our coach at University of Tennessee, and he had what he called the game maxims. There's 7 things they put up on the board. It's interesting. The first one is the team that makes the fewest mistakes wins. Fewest is the key word. When you're in business, you're gonna make mistakes. If you don't make mistakes, you haven't taken, you aren't doing anything. But then the second one is play for and make the breaks when one comes your way, score. In business, you'll get certain opportunities. Make sure you're ready for them. And the third one, if a game or a break goes against you, don't slow down or get rattled, put on more steam. When things happen bad, don't get rattled. What does that say on that cup during the Blitz in London, Natalie? What is it? Stay calm and carry on. That was Churchill's advice during the Blitz in London. So when bad things happen, stay calm and stay the course, and don't ever give up.
Now, we're really about out of time. Let me ask maybe one last question. One of the leader's job is to be the leader, to be the visible leader. And I've seen a lot of those hard times. You walking to the front and being a very visible, manifest presence of leadership. So maybe as a last piece of advice, there's times when you're leading your company when things are going hard and everybody's looking at you to say, this doesn't seem good. Things don't seem like they're going real well. How is he or she taking it? What's your advice for being the visible leader in difficult situations?
Well, in difficult times, you have to be very visible, and you have to show that you haven't lost control, you aren't panicking, and everything's going to be okay. And when we've had times like this, I've tried to always go out, both in the support center and out in the field at our stores, and be very visible and talk to everybody. And if they see that you have stayed calm and carried on, they'll feel the same way. But that is, you don't lead only in good times, you lead in bad times. And that's when a leader is really a leader, when he or she shows how they can handle bad times. Because if you think in business you aren't going to have bad times, you're just kidding yourself. But remember this, the team that makes the fewest mistakes wins.
Well, thank you. And 70 years ago, you showed up your first day as a Tennessean, and I'll speak for all Tennesseans. I'm a little biased, but that was a good day for all of us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. I told you it would be a special time, and I learned the great pilot story, Mr. Haslam, and I think one of the great takeaways, your humbleness, your humility, your kindness. And this stage has hosted a whole host of entertainers, and I don't think any of them have possessed those attributes. So thank you so very much for spending your time today. Governor, thank you as again always for being such a successful part of that story. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. Good luck.
All right.
Stay calm and carry on.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, this will conclude today's activities. I think tomorrow morning, 9 bells, we're going to start here. I think we've got the two people running for governor. We'll be here at 9 o'clock. Enjoy your night.